So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're continuing our series on the heritage farms, 150 years or more, one family on the same piece of land. Here in Jefferson County, we have 14 such families, and we're delighted to have the Wilkinsons here tonight, who have a farm since 1847, which means that this is the 175th year. So let's give them a hand and welcome. This is Charles and Joyce, and they certainly have stories to tell. Charles has allowed us how he didn't want to give a long speech, and we're not blaming anybody at all, but we'd like and look forward to hearing both of them and some members of the family who are here tell a little bit about the story of the acreage in Des Moines County that goes all the way back to 1847. For history nerds in the audience, that's the year after Iowa became a state. So that goes about as far back as you can here. Joyce, I did take interest when you said you might be willing to introduce the members of your family. Would you?
Do you want them to stand? Or?
Yeah, if you could come within camera range, we'd be grateful. And I know we've got the eighth, okay, well, we've got the eighth generation here, and we'd like to get those young men up here at one point. This is the eighth generation being represented here. Can you say your name for us, one loud and clear? Come on, this is hard.
That's Corbin.
That's Corbin.
Davis.
All right. And eighth generation also?
Yeah. Yep. This is our daughter, Lynn Godwin, and her son, Eric, and their three children, Paige and Lane and Wade.
All right. Move a little bit this way. That's great. Move a little. Let's give the next generation a hand here. That's great.
Hillary.
And one more.
This is Rusty's daughter, Hillary, and his son, Austin.
All right.
And her husband,
Wes.
Hillary Wes Davis.
Yes. And thanks to them, too. We got to speak upstairs. So as we said earlier, if there's a story that you hear differently from how you experienced it, feel free to let us know that you've got something to add. We'd be delighted. Well, in the homework I've done just as kind of a history person for this event, I've seen that what began with over 200 acres, about in 1847, is now 78 acres. Is that correct?
I think something like that, yes.
Yes, ma'am. And I know there's a backstory even to 1847 that we'd like to at least ask about to see how people got here, and did they bring farming skills with them and other skills? Because I saw things in your family exhibit that said there was one family member who was a judge in the 1820s who's famous for, made into fiction, where his name was protected, but famous for being the trial judge where some Native Americans had been killed by white people, and he had to preside over that very difficult case, and did so. Was that Winsell? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, sir, Judge Winsell.
Winsell. I think he was a farmer, but it was the first trial of white men killing Indians.
And that was in the 1820s, if I recall.
Mm-hmm.
And what state was that in? Because we weren't...
Indiana.
In Indiana, okay. And was that where the family came from immediately, or was there...
I think I saw where his father came from Tennessee.
Okay. Here in Jefferson County, we've had people from everywhere as far as the eastern states from here, but many have come from Indiana, some from the Carolinas, actually, from North Carolina, and many from Ohio, and some from some of the western counties in Pennsylvania. So it's a general westward push that began. We know that this area opened up in 1832 with the Black Hawk Purchase. Here in Fairfield, at 52 South 5th Street, there was a marker all the way back from the surveyors in 1832 and 3 that said, this is the boundary line. Everything west of this belongs to Black Hawk and other Native American tribes, and everything east now belongs and is open for people to come from East Coast and from other states to settle here. And it's a marker that has disappeared about 25 years ago. But we know for a fact that it was here in Fairfield because the line, the surveyor's line that came all the way from what's now Davenport area straight down to the edge of what's now Missouri ran right through what's now Fairfield. So if you ever go to 52 South 5th Street, you can just kind of realize that we were at the very edge then of what the map makers would ever bother to mark. They went to the edge. Well, if your forebears came, how does it trace back from father to son and so on that we had this farm changing hands from 1847 onward? Can you give us a little bit of a rundown on the generations?
I don't know what you're asking, I guess.
Well, like who came in 1847 and then?
Well, Adam Wenzel.
Yes.
Which was the judge.
The judge.
And then it went to his son, Andrew T.
Yes.
And then it went to another Wenzel. What's
There's 4 brothers come here to start with.
Yes, sir.
And they was all right around home there. And I don't know.
was it after Andrew T. was Rankin Wenzel?
Yes.
And then it went to his daughter, Thelma Wenzel Wilkinson.
Okay, so that's where the
to us.
Wilkinson name joined in.
That was Mom.
Okay, so you have kids here and grandkids here, and that
Great-grandkids here.
great grandkids here too, and that's what's fantastic. So we have 3 of the 8 generations then, going all the way back to 1847 and even farther back in time. Mm-hmm. Are there any family stories about why they chose to come here?
I don't know of any.
Okay.
Well, Dad and Mom lived with Grandma and Grandpa. Of course, they couldn't support them, both of them, so they went to Louisiana to work. And they come back broke.
All right.
But they bought the adjoining farm.
So they did. Okay, I was going to ask if they moved to be near.
Part of that 200 acres was split up between my grandmother and her sister, right?
Right.
Yep.
That's the reason it got small.
So it really stayed in the family though in smaller parcels.
And it still is.
All right, and so you do have neighbors then that you're related to.
Well, they don't live around here,
But okay, but it is in the family even more widely. That's good to know.
The other section of the farm that went to the other sister was sold to a non-family member at one point.
Okay,
So that's why that section of the farm is not at 175 years. Only the section that my grandmother, Dad's mother, received is at the 175. But the other section of the farm is now owned by the granddaughter of my grandmother's sister.
great. So that's really remarkable. I mean, when you think about all the family trees, and as you brought out, that people don't live here, and they don't stay in one place anymore. The mobility of society is just accelerated so much to keep it in the family, literally, and even be nearby in adjoining property is an accomplishment in itself. I saw up there's a great exhibit upstairs. We invite anybody to come. Every month now we have one of our featured, heritage farm families give whatever tells the story of the family as far as mementos, as far as Indian artifacts. We've seen some amazing arrowheads up there, I guess, that were found on the property. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yes.
And who found them? How far back would you say?
A boy found.
So, all right. It looked like there might be a Clovis point among them which would if you had it, I don't just say appraised for dollars, but appraised for age, we're in the 13,000-year-old range.
Oh, really?
Yes, sir. You might want to check if it makes a difference. Historically, it would make a huge difference. The ice age that pretty much took over northern Iowa and Minnesota, of course, that's why they have all the lakes, pretty much stopped around Des Moines, and they didn't grind to a pulp everything underneath them. And so we have leftovers from 14,000 years ago of people living here, and that includes spearheads and arrowheads. So you may have found some very, very old things. Were they found in creek beds, or were they found?
The ones I found were the,
Okay, which creek? I just
just south of their house.
okay.
Stump Creek.
Stump Creek. Okay, so we're in Des Moines Township there. I just try to get the names.
Him and his friend was riding the motorcycles down at the creek,
Yep.
and they started up over the bank, and he found this axe head.
Really? That's
And he also had a big thorn in his hand that run clear up here.
uh-oh. Now we give you equal time for rebuttal if you want to. If you want to challenge this story, that's okay. No, but that's a
This
good.
creek is actually in Van Buren County,
Oh, it is. Okay.
so, yeah, we live right on the edge.
See, we
Yeah, I was
pay
gonna say-
taxes in Van Buren and Jefferson County.
Both.
Yeah. And that's not a plus.
Well, it's a privilege that few have. So we
Yep.
Great story, great story. And I looked at some other things that seemed to have to do with dairy products. At some point in the family history, was it a dairy farm?
When the farms were smaller, you always had dairy cows.
Yes, ma'am. So just dairy equipment that happened to be left from then. Okay.
Before I went to school, I had to milk 13 cows by hand.
Wow.
And we rode the horse buses. Mom went east with Prince and Dobbin, and Dad went west. And it was just 3 miles to town west and 5 miles east. So us kids always went with Dad.
Shorter. Now, may I ask, somebody said that there was members of your family who went to one-room schools that you didn't, but the people,
See, Selma was in consolidated
okay.
before anybody,
Well, his mother went to Selma, which was consolidated at that time, so she graduated from there.
Okay.
I don't know when they ever had country schools in that area.
Hard to say. There were 99, as we mentioned before, in the county, in this county as a whole. The state legislature actually set that up as a precondition for statehood, that no child would have to walk more than 2 miles to school. And so the schools are positioned, really just through the surveyors, 4 miles apart. So 2 miles this way, 2 miles that way, whichever was closer, or if it was equal, you never had to go, and that was by design. And so Iowa, among all the states in the United States, actually had more one-room schoolhouses than any other state, period, irrespective of size. A lot of times people think we don't have that big of a state, but Iowa is bigger in territory than the state of New York. Don't tell a New Yorker that, they won't like it. But it's a fact. And so we had a lot of kids, over 1,200 schools for the farm family children to go to, and 99 were here in Jefferson.
Like we were trying to tell you, we never walked because we rode a horse-drawn school bus.
Yeah, that. And so it was. You said horse bus, and so would it make like a circuit to pick up kids? Mm-hmm. How many kids could ride?
Well, ours wasn't very big, but I think there was 10 of us that rode it.
All right.
And during the flood in 47, the back steps on the school bus was dragging water.
Wow.
Nowadays, you couldn't do that, but
Yeah. Would that be a 40-inch wheel? What would you get? What was the size of the wheels?
yeah,
40-inch?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was a lot of water. Of course, everybody here was in 1993 knows that it was the state of Iowa became one of the Great Lakes. You know, that it was, and lived through that. It was pretty amazing. But, so 1947 was another
It was
big
worse than
flood.
93.
Wow, wow. Okay. So 10 kids, and then you could go the other way? Was that another?
Mom had a bigger bus,
Okay.
but
And how did your family end up being the people that drove the bus, so to speak? That had the
for money.
Got it. I was going to say, I don't blame them. That's good. So people, they would actually, there was a job that people gave some money per year for every child to ride that
Well,
bus.
You were on the tail end of the bus route, weren't you? Some of the furthest away. So
Yeah, that's about the way it worked.
Okay, so your family farm then was like at one end of the line, and so drop all the other kids off and then be home.
for the Selma School District. They
Okay.
lived in,
So I
to
grew
the
up on,
northeast.
sorry, Lynn. I grew up on the other side of the Des Moines River.
Yes, ma'am.
So my folks drove the school bus on that side.
I see. Okay, got it.
she lived in Hackabarney, and I lived in Turkish Ranch.
Okay. All right. So you know what's going to come next year. How'd you meet each other? If you're that, you're from different worlds.
There's 5 of us in our class,
Okay.
and we was 2 of them.
That's 40% of your class. Okay. Fair enough. I guess you're bound to meet at some point then. So that's good. That's great.
I like to think I got the best one, but I don't know that for
Well,
sure.
very good. You've been
60
married a long time. You know what
For
to say.
63 years.
Really? Oh, give him a hand. That's so great. That's great. Very best wishes. Well, then it was convenient if you got along because you were going to be in each other's company, whether you liked it or not.
That's right.
Okay, so I'm glad you liked it. That's great. How many grades? How many school grades? Would be represented in any? Like when those kids rode the bus with you, how many grades were in that bus?
Well, it could be all 12.
All 12, so it was. All right. Amazing. Any stories about being kids in this situation? And did Selma get bigger or smaller as a school system? I know there's consolidation that went on from 1959.
Well, by the time we went to school, our farm was in the Fairfield School District.
Right. And
So all
so,
of us went to Fairfield to school.
got it. And you took the bus in.
Yep.
Different kind of bus. Okay, that's great.
See,
I wondered
Dad and 5 neighbors had the choice of transferring to Fairfield
Right.
or
Going to Cardinal.
Cardinal,
Okay.
and the old Dad and the taxes was cheaper in Fairfield, so
Good. Well, glad to hear Fairfield was good for that.
Charles, does one of those school buses still exist?
there's one sitting down there, Dowd's. I don't know whether it's any of ours or not.
I thought it was.
It's a Dowd's.
It was,
It's a Dowd.
Dowd's.
So the horse bus is still there?
yeah.
There's a horse bus.
Yeah.
down
Oh,
there.
Jason, that'd be great for us to get pictures of.
They had a power wagon.
Yeah, really?
Dad tells me about riding the power wagon then.
Oh,
It's-
okay.
It's here in town. There was. I don't know if it still is.
When the Dodge Power Wagon show comes,
Yes.
they bring it. So we
Over to
got
Mount
see our
Pleasant.
school.
Or in the one here?
The
Yeah,
one
that's
here.
right. That's great. Wow. Well, yes.
Were the school buses, the horse-drawn school buses, were they enclosed?
Yeah.
Was it an open?
Yeah.
So it was enclosed, it had a roof and sides and whatnot?
They had a little kerosene heater
Huh,
that's set up there by the driver, but we carried hot bricks
huh.
with us
This is great.
to keep warm.
We've heard hot potatoes too, but
Yeah.
I heard they didn't last that long if people are hungry. So, all right. So that
There's also a church and cemetery
on that same route.
on that part.
Oh, okay. Wow. So we should be able to.
Was. The church is gone, cemetery.
We found, looking at the history of Jefferson County, that there are places that the only thing left is a barn in the middle of a bean field. or, you know, when the coal mines kind of dried up, so to speak, in Purlee, the 400, you know, houses that had been built there because they had enough trees and a sawmill right in town, it just starts to evaporate. So we're grateful that people are still in the place where they came in from the very beginning, and are able to tell the story of it. And it especially means a lot to us here at the museum, where we're trying to find out, as far back as people go, their connection with this place. Our basic notion is that if you drill down deep enough in any one place, you're going to reach shared bedrock. And we realize what we've got
Good.
in common.
Yeah.
Sure.
Our grandson got this plat map off from the internet.
Oh,
It's,
yes.
1871,
Yes.
and it shows the cemetery and Methodist church there. It was called Wenzel Chapel.
Oh, it's named after your family then, roughly.
Yeah, and then the cemetery is Wenzel Cemetery.
Now, this 1871 map, Jason, can we show that? Good, he'll show it. Jason's great about this. Afterwards, he's going to go and shine the camera up on the 3rd floor at the exhibit that's up there of your family artifacts, we can call it. And this 1871 map is quite famous. It has all 12 townships of Jefferson County. It has all the land ownership. It just goes, you can get them item by item for each township and see whose property was where the schools are, where the churches are, where the cemeteries are. It's an amazing historical record. We know that, you know, again, Iowa hadn't been officially a state even 30 years by that point. So it was, it's a remarkable record, and other people who come in and say, well, I have family members who go back that far, you'd be able to see what their parcels were. So if you ever get a chance. We've got some older maps down on 1st floor here that go all the way back to 1845, the year before Iowa became a state. And you can see everything is, all the drawings and the names of places are on the eastern band, about the 40 miles in from the Mississippi River. And after a certain point, it's just horizontal surveyors lines. There's nothing left. We're at the outer edge here in what's now Jefferson County. So at one point, we were kind of the end of civilization, at least as the map makers saw it. So it's been a remarkable growth with over 3 million people living here now, and back then, not nearly as many. Are there stories from the family about the challenges like the 1947 flooding, or your own experience of difficult winters, for example, or the times of crop, challenges? We've heard about the infamous when the Dust Bowl was going on everywhere else. Here in Iowa, they had the chinch bugs in Iowa. Chinch bugs were every bit as devastating to the environment as the Dust Bowl was elsewhere. They would eat an entire field in a day and then go across the road the next day and do the next one. There was one whole year with no crop at all. I don't know if there are any stories about that.
Dad always talked about digging a trench around the field.
Yes, sir.
And putting oil or
kerosene, I heard.
Yeah.
Try to burn them off.
Or just fall in it and.
Hope they would. Yeah, it wasn't successful.
No.
Unfortunately, there was one whole year where there was no crop. 2 other years, adjoining years, half a crop for the state of Iowa as a whole. So, I'm not surprised that was a story. I'm sorry to hear it, but it was really a tough time for everybody to have made through. Any other ones that?
Grandpa Wenzel Rankin, he was, kind of like Rusty. He'd try anything, and some of them would work and some of them wouldn't.
Well?
But he raised 90 bushel oats back, I don't know what year that was.
No, I don't know either.
But Walsh's farmer come down and took pictures of the shocks.
Yeah.
And 90 bushel back then, that was quite a yield.
That was. Now, what customarily would he be raising instead? Corn mostly, or?
Well, Grandpa, he would just try anything.
Okay.
And
They were Vanguard oats, weren't they?
yeah, Vanguard was and they still got them.
Huh.
Dad, I wonder if you could tell the story of hiding in the wagon with Grandpa going to town and
Oh, every Friday afternoon, Grandpa would go to town. And us kids would hide in the wagon and go with him. And he'd go in and buy these half-rotten bananas. So we'd have something to eat.
Good price for those, I guess.
Yeah.
That's good. That's great.
You didn't get those things. I mean, if you got an orange at Christmas time, it was something.
Yes, ma'am. Well, now, where would that town? Where did you drive? All the way to Fairfield, or all the way to what was the nearest?
Libertyville.
Libertyville. Got it. Are there any stories far enough back of family involvement in church? You mentioned the Methodist chapel being, was that your family tradition all the way back, it sounds, to Indiana and,
We went to Mount Zion,
okay,
and that was up the road about a mile from
Okay.
where we live.
I don't know of any stories about way back.
do you know when electricity came to your farm?
That was kind of neat. Come home from school and I'd pull the chains, see which one come on.
What year?
It was,
40, I think ours was on in 47.
well, it was a little after that.
It was after the war, after World War II? I know it was a challenge for a lot of Iowa farmers because the Electrification Act that Congress passed in 1936 didn't take hold because the World War II came. And so copper was prized material for the war years, and the wiring then was pushed down as a much lower priority for all the rural parts of the country. But the farther you were from town, the less likely
That's right.
to get the electricity. So a lot were after World War II.
It was
So
sure a blessing to get it.
I bet, yes, sir. Sometimes there are stories in the families about when the lights came on, Mom, the mother, already had bought Jell-O to be able to make it. The reason I was told is they had to have a constant temperature to make Jell-O. It wouldn't hold. And if you had just ice, it would be cold enough for a while and then not quite cold enough, and you'd never have any Jell-O. So that was a big celebration in a lot of places. I used to hear about it. I don't know if that happened in your family.
I just remember we had a refrigerator already sitting there, and we came home from town one day and it was running, and that was really something.
Fantastic. So you were ready for the power to get switched on. That's great. And then one other one I always have to ask when indoor plumbing came around.
That was in '59, wasn't it?
That was later than that.
I was gonna say,
Okay.
as I say, we used an outhouse for a while when we moved to this farm.
Okay.
We didn't have plumbing, so Rusty and I remember going out.
I was kind of cold at midnight.
Yes, sir. I imagine so.
I think 1961 was the first modern house we lived in,
Okay.
2 years after we were married.
Okay.
So there was water in the house, but the drinking water was out in the well
Ah, got it.
for when I started coming around a long time ago.
Good recollection. How deep was the well for the drinking water, roughly?
32 foot
That's pretty good.
there at home. And we had a bucket and a rope. We'd put our cream down in it
Yep.
to keep it cold.
Yeah.
One of the stories I remember Grandpa telling me was back in the Depression time, he run a thrashing machine, had a tractor and a thrashing machine. And he told me, he said he had it all paid for but $5, and he couldn't come up with the $5, and he lost it. Don't seem like much now.
Oh, Well, this story, just to say to Jason that this is during the Depression years, to come up with the last $5 to make final payment on your equipment might not be there. We've had people tell us the stories about having patches on patches on patches for their clothes, and a nickel meant a lot.
Dad had a thresh machine at 20, well, this one here was a 34-inch schooner width, which is a pretty good size. And we went across the river to thrash, because that's where the money was at.
Okay.
And
What year would that have been roughly? What was that?
well, we grew,
How old were you?
I was still in school. That was a treat to go.
Okay, you get a day off?
But we was across the river thrashing,
Yes.
and one morning we'd always go in the morning and grease up. And I remember this guy. His name was Clarence Blocker. Jim probably knows. But anyhow, I was there greasing up the lower part of the thrash machine, and all once this straw pile just exploded. An old chum that stayed with him was sleeping in that straw pile.
Oh.
He was mad because, well, they'd always burn it, and he was mad because they burned it. I was his sleeping.
I was going to say, that was this blanket.
Yep.
Oh, my goodness.
In those years, there were what I would call bums
Yes?
that rode, and we had one that came and stayed in our barn,
Yep.
and the folks just
Was it? Well, it was hard.
something to do, something to eat,
Yep. And maybe they'd help a little bit, and then,
and then they'd move on.
yes, ma'am. Wow. Which railroads? We had so many different small railroads that were,
This
farm to
was-
market. Oh,
Rock Island.
okay.
And we wasn't very far from number 8, where the tracks went right by,
Okay.
and we was always getting somebody,
Who'd been riding the rails?
yeah.
Okay.
And of course, Mom would always feed them.
And that seemed to be the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You help them out, and down the line they help somebody else out, you hope.
Back then, we never did meet a stranger. I mean, the neighbors was all neighbors, and make homemade ice cream. We had 2.5-gallon ice cream freezer.
Big.
And we'd always make ice cream, but it was always in the wintertime when we had ice from the pond. And
So Dad, there, on this farm, there was a pond that we remember, we called it Sawmill Pond. And I wondered if you could think of some stories about what Grandma would share about Sawmill Pond, and she had a lot of friends that would come and spend the summers there and at the pond and things. Can you think of some stories about the?
Mom was pretty big, and we'd have fried chicken for dinner, and she'd go out and she had a single-shot Ethica rifle, and she'd always shoot a chicken in the head because she didn't want to.
Yep.
We always had fried chicken for dinner on Saturday or Sunday.
She was a good shot.
Yeah, she was.
This pond that Lynn's talking about is just a little puddle now. We have pictures of his mother and friends swimming in that pond, and that's how much things change.
Why was it called Sawmill Pond?
Yeah.
Well, you can tell them that.
Yeah. How'd it get named?
Had a sawmill there, and it was fired the steam engine. And they got the water from the pond.
So Rankin Winsell, then, did he sell lumber and things?
Guys would just bring it in to sell for their own use.
But the mill, when was the mill put together? How far back?
Well, they were portable,
Yep,
basically,
okay.
weren't they?
Kinda, but old Harold Brown run the sawmill, and he had a big old collie dog. And Harold kind of liked to drink a little bit, and he'd climb in the shack, and he said that old collie dog saved his life a bunch of times because he slept right on top of him.
Well, the loyalty of a man's best friend.
Yep.
That's good.
Yep.
Well, we did know that there were sawmills on Brush Creek, way back, even like 1838. So people made their, they ground the grain wherever they could. I'm sure Des Moines River area, there was a lot of mills along there. We had mills here in town, and sawmills, like I mentioned, in Purlee, with enough trees there to make 400 houses once upon a time. It was true that even to this day, Iowa is not much forested, because we have great topsoil and great growing chances, so we grow more. And the earliest records of the surveyors and the earliest records of any visitors who kept things, kept track of things in writing, allowed us how every surveyor was required, if he found a tree 6 inches in diameter or bigger, to record that and to say what that tree was and where it was. So what that implies to us, looking back in time, is that there weren't that many. Fairfield became known as the Forest City by the 40 or 50 years after it was officially incorporated, even before Iowa was a state, 1839. So by 1875 and a little bit after, Fairfield was being called the Forest City. And it wasn't because it was heavily forested, it's because the people made it that way. For whatever reason, this well before Parsons College in 1875 was founded, people had it in them to make this place have a lot more trees than seemed to have been here at the time. And so the prairie grass that's so tall that was found for the early settlers was much more prominent than the woods, which was mostly near the water, mostly near the waterways.
So down where we live,
Yes.
there are places that are called woodlots. We live on the edge of the timber,
Yes.
so they sold woodlots for people to come and get their wood.
Yes.
It was a little more valuable back then than this flat ground.
Aha.
And
Now, for your part, was there, what's the nearest water other than the pond that you had? And what's the nearest, and what's the name of that creek that was?
Stump Creek.
Stump Creek. Is that water that runs through your property?
Well,
Or at least,
that's where it starts.
okay, got it. So that,
Des Moines River's not very far.
I was going to say, what is the distance to Des Moines River from your?
About 5 miles.
Okay, good. So you're right down there. All right. Well, you're bringing up great questions and some stories that are fun to hear about. Didn't know that great-grandma was a markswoman. Annie, get your gun, just move over here. That's great. Any other stories that you want to bring up that you've heard? Family celebrations, I'd like to ask, what holidays were the time that everybody would gather for like a family meal? Was it, some say weekly after church, or some say it was Thanksgiving was the biggest one, others 4th of July? What do you think?
Well, the Wilkinsons have a reunion about every 2 years or so. And
But when you were a kid, where'd you go?
We just celebrated every night.
Fair enough.
The neighbors, when Dad was growing up, there was 7 kids in their family, and the neighbors had 12. And then Pearson's was it. There were several of them. I mean, a huge family.
So families nearby had enough kids that you really had a
Oh, yeah.
community of
That's
kids.
why we had that 2.5 gallon ice cream freezer.
Gonna say. So you didn't get to eat it all yourself then?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I wondered about that. So it was a community event then to have that ice cream.
Yeah.
What?
I mean, I had 5 sisters, and they had 10 in their family, and of course we'd all get together, and we'd all fox hunt on weekends.
And I have any stories about the fox hunting? Any stories about the fox hunting?
We walked all the way,
Where to? I'm sorry. To the.
turkey scratch,
Okay.
and it was
How many miles?
probably, 10 mile to start with, or Roseanne Barr bought most of the turkey
Yes.
scratch, and but it was fun.
How about Fred?
Fred Fulton, our neighbor, he's only about this tall, but man, he could walk. And I'd always want to go with him, because,
You get there faster?
well, I thought I could keep up.
Oh, so it's a challenge.
Yeah. But snow was just melting, and we was clear up on the other side of Roseanne's, and we had to cross that Stump Creek to get home. Well, Fred said, we gotta cross it, and there's a tree fell down, it was kind of a log, and it was bouncing up and down the creek. Fred said, let's go, and he walked across that. I didn't know whether to go or not, because I wasn't that good.
Like Paul Bunyan, and you got to do the log rolling.
But Fred, he just went right across there, and I thought that was the only way I was going to get home, so I went.
Did you fall in?
No.
Give him a hand. Give him a hand. That's good. That's good. It's a great story. Thanks for bringing that one up. There must be other favorite stories that come out. The grandkids always hear them, and they always ask to hear them again. If you're a grandchild or...
Well, it's not that exciting of a story, but Aunt Rita told a story about how you slid all the way from the driveway by the barn, clear down. But there was something else to it. I don't remember if you were going to get in trouble or...
Dad bought a new sled for us for Christmas, and they just graded a dirt road, and it kind of sloped down. And you could start there and go clear to the creek. And Dad decided he's going to go. Of course, Dad is pretty big, and he went down along this side hill, and he caved the runners
Oh, no.
on the sled.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear it. That's hard. How many kids could have been on that? How would have the sled that the family bought? How many kids could have fit on it?
Well, 4, I think.
Ooh, it's a big sled.
We went to Turkey Scratch, and I had a big hill up there it was on dirt road. And Melvin, Hannah, and I made a kind of a sled out of car hoods, and it was plumb dangerous.
Slick?
It's a
Yeah.
pretty steep hill.
It is, okay. So,
And all the neighbors would come and gather and would have a big bonfire. This was when we were younger, and the whole neighborhood would go to Turkey Scratch and sled down that hill and
So if you take a car hood, turn it upside down, you got a big bowl,
Yeah.
and it's slick because it's metal. And once you start, you're not stopping, right?
That's right. And you wasn't guiding it neither.
So, was that a religious event then? You say your prayers on the way down?
It was about every Sunday occurrence
Okay, fair
going down
enough.
that hill.
Yeah. What were the snowiest, if you remember, you talked about the floods in 1947. If you both look back, what would be the snowiest winters? Or a lot of us, maybe we're here in 78, 79, really, but, and we can hear some others, but what,
When was it, Russ, when you got stuck about every night coming home from work?
78 or 9, right?
yeah. That was up, I was in Minnesota then, it was just awful.
We
But-
moved from, we rented a farm and it had a new house on it, so we moved from the new house to the old farmhouse, which is, nobody lived in it for several years, and then they was building a new house. In the meantime, I remember waking up one morning with snowdrift on my bed.
Oh,
That's when we used that house.
That was their education. We lived in this old house for 2 months that didn't have any plumbing.
right,
And they got their education.
all right. No, it is, you're right, it
The
is.
worst one I remember, and I have no idea what year it was so icy. And you couldn't, it was clear in January before we got crops out.
Wow.
But I tried to pull this wagon up this little slope, and I
Couldn't get up?
He had to come get me with the combine.
Wow. We've heard stories of the kids going to school anyway, and we asked them how they got there, and they said, we skated. We just skated to school, a lot of these places. But it was, I'm wondering, so it must have iced over around Halloween and then just stayed if you couldn't get crops out. Is that right? Somewhere.
Yeah. But, that wasn't so awful many years ago. I mean, probably in the 60s.
Okay, it's far enough back. There are times when I say, oh, it's not that long ago, it was
Yeah.
1966, and people look at me. Mr. Eyre, you're getting old. It's like, okay, yes, sir. It is true. Well, but it's good to know. It's good for the kids to know. It's good for all the generations to find out what life was like before, and that must have been an education.
That was 71.
Okay, to be in that house.
You could get on top of that old house and slide down the roof, and there was enough snow. Well, there might have been a 2-foot gap between the eave and the snowdrift, but you could jump it.
Wow. It's a great. Well, sometimes people think that we're making things up when we talk about, but it's not. It's not.
I'm starting to see where Rusty got his
Skills?
skills.
Very good. Well, it isn't like fishing, it isn't like the one that got away. People actually, we did go through these things, and it sounds like. Any other striking, hottest summer ever?
I remember the riding in that school bus in the mud. I mean,
We had a big hill just west of us,
Yes.
and we'd get about halfway up, and we had to stop and poke the mud out of the wheels
Yeah.
to get to going.
And when you had the big mud, how would it just stop? Or how did you
yeah,
get out and push? Or,
The horses
couldn't.
couldn't pull it no more.
yeah,
Wow.
you just keep poking.
How
it.
many horses?
Just 2.
there were some days you didn't make it home, right? You had to walk
Yeah.
on to school or walk.
Down in Selma, they had what they call a horse barn, and Dad and all the drivers would pack hay down there during the summer and to feed the horses.
Did Grandma, your mom, Dad, did she play sports or anything with the
She
summer
played
school?
basketball.
Do you know how many kids were in her class?
No.
She went to Selma also? Okay.
But I would say there were 10 or 13 in her class. Of course, they played 2 on one end and 2 on the other end and 1 in the middle.
Oh. I guess you're gonna use everybody you can. Iowa was most famous for having 3 on, 3.
3.
Yep. And 6 on 6 total, but you play only the defending or the offense.
Yeah, the middle one just stayed in the middle.
Everybody knows 1983. I hope you're proud. Okay, state champions for those girls. Coach Breen is a Parsons grad and is going to be part of this upcoming film in this Fairfield history series. It'll be a year from tonight that Parsons is going to have the next 50th reunion for everybody who wants to come back from the last year of Parsons College, 1973. So it'll be a big event, and we're honoring Coach Breen. I want to be straight with you. I coached several state championship teams in tennis here, but my inspiration to try to even think about doing that was Dan Breen, and those girls. So if you know any of them, please tell them thanks. I appreciate they have done what they have.
Rusty graduated with that.
With
bunch
that.
of girls.
All right. That's pretty fantastic. Well, these kind of like, this is your shot. You can say whatever you'd like. If there's somebody that you really wanted to, kind of give what for, that's okay too. This is your opportunity. But no, we're grateful that you've come, and these are amazing stories. And I especially want to thank the family members who've brought out some of those stories too, and your own experiences.
Got one I'd like to share.
Sure. Okay. Is it okay? Can you just stand right in front of the? Can he take off and sit where I am?
Yeah.
Come on in and take my place. This is Rusty. Please come up and sit here. That's great.
Spoke at the.
Right. I'm sorry, you got stuck.
This is just a funny story. When we ended up moving got the new house built, moved out of the old farmhouse, we got to tear down the old farmhouse. Well, I wasn't very old, but my job was to tear down the outhouse. So I got up on the outhouse and I was tearing the roof off of it. When I got a hole in the roof, the thing was on fire. He'd lit it on fire. So,
How old would you have been?
7.
Yeah.
They come up piling out of there.
You'd intentionally lit it to
Yeah.
burn the thing down? Wait.
I bailed real quick.
That's when you figured your kids had fast reaction times after all?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Wasn't very big. You couldn't go very far.
Well, the cave was right there too, wasn't it?
Yep. Well, that house had a cave. We called it the cave, but
Yeah,
to
it was,
It was 6 foot out of the ground.
store your potatoes and whatever in.
Okay.
it was cement on the inside. And I don't know.
Motorcycles went over really.
Yeah.
My grandmother was deathly afraid of snakes, and she'd tell me a story about going down in the cave, and I don't know whether she opened the door to go in, but one fell and right across her shoulders. So you can hear all kinds of stories. Some good, some bad.
Anybody else? This is great. You've had some stories. Anybody else? Yep, you got one?
Tell them about the fireworks in the car.
Yeah. The Wall Boys, we went to Missouri to get fireworks, and they had a bunch of them, and they decided to stop. We was behind them, and they decided to stop and light them off the bridge at Selma, and it got, and the rest of them was in the car. And that roof on that car was just like that, just a teepee. They was lucky.
Yeah.
They was sitting on the bridge and throwing them over into the river.
Right.
And some fire got into that box of firecrackers.
Oh, kaboom.
And it just bulged that Lincoln car.
Yeah, it was. Made one of the boys deaf,
Oh.
Roger.
He was going to the Navy, and they couldn't take him then until his ears
Yeah.
healed up.
Did great grandpa have his car wired, so if you touched it, it shocked you, or what was that about?
Well, they just played tunes.
No, but didn't you have 12 volts to frame or something? And if you,
I did that.
It was said very softly, Mike. True confessions.
no kidding.
Proud to be part of the family.
So I will share the farm was divided.
Can you come up? Do you mind? Come on, we're
Here, you can have my chair.
brother and sister
I
get a
was going
chance.
to talk about Rusty is what I was going to say.
That's good. You get to point to him. Whatever.
The Wenzel farm, I had shared was divided, and the two sisters had one half. So my grandmother has had the half that we're talking about this evening. But I think it's a wonderful opportunity because my brother and my son are involved in farming, then the other half of the farm ground for our relatives. So we have the opportunity to keep that farm in production, and I appreciate that.
We still farm most of the 240 original acres.
Give them a hand. I'm in. That's great. What are you proudest of as you look back?
I guess up to us, the farmers always passed down, but it seemed like I had to buy it for some reason.
Well, you should continue that.
Huh?
You should continue that then.
To pass it down, right?
What, passing it down or selling it?
Fair enough. Emma, what do you think?
Just the wonderful family we've raised.
I think it's great. We're grateful that you have told us the story, that many generations have taken part, that we in fact have the 8th generation from the original founders all here tonight too.
And we just had our youngest 8th generation come in a little bit ago.
All right, so thanks to all of you. Let's thank the Wilkinsons now tonight. Thanks. So this entire series is sponsored by the Farm Bureau. We're grateful for that. And our good friends at a bank that used to be called First National Bank have made this series possible here at Carnegie Library, old days, right here, Carnegie Museum now. And we're happy every month on the first Friday to have another of the 14 families that are the heritage farm families of Jefferson County. 150 years of continuous ownership and stewardship here in the county and in the good state of Iowa. So congratulations and thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.